As Leslie said, if you would like to hold on to your questions and ask them verbally, otherwise I am happy for you to put it in the chat or to send a message to Leslie anonymously, just so that you get a lot out of this evening. I really want to be able to respond to people and their questions. Now, I'm very excited about this topic because I live in a world where we want to be fixed. We live in what's called a sickness model, and we wait until we're sick and then we go to the doctor and we ask the doctor to fix us. And we live in a world where people do that with psychologists as well. And none of this is a criticism. I'm just describing what happens where when we start having problems, we go to a psychologist and we say, please fix my child. And what we need to do is remind ourselves that we are the parents and we are the primary educators of our children. And therefore, there is a lot that we can do to provide our children the best environment for them. And that's what I want everyone to come away with tonight, is feeling empowered to do a lot for their children in many different ways, because bringing up children in a calm environment and working on the things that I'm going to talk to you about is setting your kids up really well in every area of their lives, physically, socially, emotionally, in every single way. So I'm really glad at this opportunity, and I hope that everyone will take it in that spirit. And that's why I don't want anybody to leave feeling guilty. This isn't the idea that you leave and go, oh, I didn't do that and I feel bad. And that's the reason people have often told me that they don't come to parenting talks. So not all of you are here. I'm not talking about you, but often people feel I'm really struggling, or it's a criticism, or I'm doing it. The idea of this is to actually become better. Many of you have done my parenting course. It's called Become a Better Parent. It's not saying anything you're doing is wrong. I don't know what anybody's doing. It's about going, whatever I'm doing, let me increase my skill set. Let me do some things a bit differently or a bit better, because I know that every single parent, everyone here tonight wants the best. We all want the best for our children. So really, as I say, to really go, let's take back some of the power that we can to work with our children, and not to feel bad about what we're doing, but think about moving forward in a better way. Now, what is really interesting for me, and I've lately been talking about my journey a lot, because this is one advantage of getting older. Leslie was reminding me that I spoke at Emmanuel like 20 years ago in Willara. So I said, when you start talking in decades, you're getting old. But the other advantage of talking in decades is I've been through a lot of iterations of psychological theories and so on. And really where we've come back to, and people like Gabor Mate are making it more, not only fashionable, I don't mean that in a bad way, but that people are using the word attachment in everyday language. But it's become part of everyday knowledge about what's important in good parenting. And attachment is the most important thing you can do. Attachment is the ability to, it's like forming an invisible connection with your child, that when they leave the room, like when little children start crawling, let's say they are 9 months old, and they turn the corner, they know you're still there. It's not only what we call object permanence, they know you haven't disappeared, but they actually have the sort of invisible string that they know you're still there. So the better the attachment is, the more secure the child is to explore. Now, what we also know is that our brains are neuroplastic. So nothing literally is fixed or set in stone. And therefore, even if things weren't as ideal as you would have liked them to be, all of this can be fixed and changed by the strategies that I'm going to suggest today. It's never too late to improve your attachment, and good attachment can never be too much. It's about connecting with your child in a way that they feel seen, that they feel heard, that you are aware of them. It's about being present with them. And one of the ways you do that is, it's very simple. It's being present. It's turning off your devices. It's listening to what they're saying. It's making eye contact. Eye contact is crucial for brain development. It's very much about being present and being there with your child. Now, this doesn't mean all the time. And again, I'm not trying to add extra pressure, but it's got to be enough time that the child grows up knowing that when I speak, mom or dad will take time to listen to me, enough of the time that I feel heard. And when I express something, that they are taking enough time to see who I am and not to impose their agendas onto me. So attachment is that feeling of I'm here in a secure place to be myself and to be seen and to be heard. The second thing about attachment is that it needs to provide safety and security. It's very hard for a child to have good attachment when they don't feel safe. And this is why there's been a huge move away from punishment. And I honestly don't hear it very often, but I did, fun enough, hear it this week, that parents hit their children. We've moved a long way from the smacking debate. 20 years ago, I was on the radio quite a number of times where people were asking about smacking, and then there was a TV show called The Smack. There was all this debate. We've sort of moved far away from that now, where we're talking about providing a safe environment. So children will be calm when they grow up in a safe environment. And what that means is parents who are their protectors need to be there to make them safe. So a simple example, might sound very trivial, is let's say you're out with your child, you're at Coles, you don't even know these people, and your child drops something. And let's say they even break something. And then the cleaner comes and you go, oh, I'm so ashamed of my child, I'm so sorry. And then the manager comes and you go, what can I do? You know, this child is impossible. That child can't feel safe. Now, again, if it's a once-off, that's okay. But if chronically you're doing this kind of a thing, then you, the parent who's the protector, are actually aligning yourself with strangers, the cleaner at Coles, to say what a klutz your child is and how embarrassed your child makes you feel. So that's when I'm saying these are simple things. It's like when the child breaks something, is you stand next to the child and you say, don't worry, I'm here with you. This is a problem, it can be fixed. And when the cleaner comes, you go, thank you for cleaning. Lucky it's easy to clean up messes. Now, if your child did something deliberate, then you wait until you get home where you might sit down and you might go, look, I still feel it's true. It's only a glass, it doesn't matter. But let's say it's an older child, you might go, I want you to pay something back, or I want you to do something to show, you know, that there's a consequence if you feel there needs to be. But in general, you need to align yourself with your child. And so often we don't. We align ourselves with other people and the child doesn't feel safe and secure. You want your child, when something goes wrong, to come to you. And so the message you want to give the child is, I will be here for you, even if you do something that I don't approve of. And this can be very hard. And everything I'm saying actually is a big ask for parents. I'm not saying this lightly, that, oh, it's easy. You know, it's hard to always go, something's okay. But we do live in a world, I see it with parents again today, which wouldn't have been possible before, where they say to their teenage kids, as an example, I'd rather if you were drunk and sick and vomiting in the toilet that you call me to collect you than you don't tell me what's going on. So whatever the equivalent is with little children, you want them to know, whatever you've done, rather come and tell me. And then what you need to do, which really works well, is to reward them for telling the truth rather than making a fuss about what happens. So let's say they come and they go, I picked the flower and I ruined your expensive bonsai special, I don't know, Japanese something. Because your child told you the truth, and you want the child to feel secure that they can make mistakes or even be naughty or bad, you want to say, I'm so proud of you for telling me the truth. Give them a hug. And then you talk about either how can we prevent it from happening again? Maybe the child has to clean the garden twice, sweep it, as, you know, learning that you've got to learn to look after things. Maybe part of your parenting will be to teach the child not to break things and how to value things. It becomes an educative process, but you rather want that than the child not telling you. I'm going to give you adult examples because sometimes they give a fantastic perspective. So we talk about this in corporations now. We talk about what's called psychological safety. It's become a bit of a buzzword. And what we're trying to tell, when I say we, it's not coming from me, but when I talk about it, talking about the message, is you will get more out of your employees if they feel safe. So this is an example, true story. There was somebody who was a painter in a chemical factory, and by mistake, when he was packing up, his ladder knocked a switch and all these toxic chemicals went into the water system. It was a Friday afternoon. This guy was beside himself, but he phoned his boss and he said, look, I'm locking up here. These chemicals have gone into this water tank. I don't know what to do. And his boss, the owner of the painting company, was furious. He said, you're fired. And then he thought, what should I do? And then he called the owner of the chemical factory. So the owner thanked him and said, what did you do with the employee? He said, no, don't worry, I fired him. He said, I want you to reinstate him and I want you to invite him to a cocktail party on Wednesday night. They had a cocktail party and he presented him with a massive check for $10,000. And he said, I want to thank you for telling me the truth. Because if you hadn't told me that you had flicked the switch, people could have died. I could have lost my business. And so I'm rewarding you for telling the truth. And I'm encouraging all my employees to do the same. That's what psychological safety is. So these things don't end in childhood. You want to create an environment that no matter what your child does, they're going to come and tell you. Because at the end, if you don't, it's actually much worse in every way, in terms of your relationship, in terms of them being able to relate to other people, in terms of your child not growing up traumatized with secrets. It's more about going, I don't mind, you can set off toxic chemicals, but I'm going to be here for you and we're going to solve the problem together. Maybe it might be something, as I say, if it's an older child, where you might take money out of their pocket. And I'm saying it might, not always, because the lesson itself is you are safe to come and tell me what you've done wrong. So children grow up with a lot of fear, and we need to encourage this. And that's why giving a reward, and the reward can be a hug, is very valuable, because you don't want them to grow up in fear. You want them to know that mom and dad are my source of safety, especially when I've done something wrong. It's easy for them to be my source of safety when I'm great. Not so easy. So when they do it when I've done something wrong, when I come home from school and I tell them what I did, and they reward me by listening and being kind to me telling the truth, I can be safe to be myself. And that helps me be a calm adult. Ultimately, that helps me be someone who grows up in the world feeling secure and not having to be somebody who I'm not, or not having to pretend that I'm perfect. So this is very, very important. And we know in development, the younger you are, the better it is. As I say, you can always change it. You can always improve the attachment later. But when you have growing children, and you're a group at the ELC and you have young children, your children's brains are still developing. And providing safety and security in their early years is giving them an incredible foundation for life. It's a really important thing that you're doing. Now, the other thing we now know is that human beings have social brains. And we know this now because we have technology that can look at what's happening in my brain when I'm talking to you. So it's interesting how it was discovered. Before we had this technology, the way I found this fascinating, so I'm going to share it. The way people used to study the brain, this is when I was in uni decades ago. See, Leslie, we keep coming back to the decade. They would literally take the top of the skull of a monkey and put electrodes on, and then see. So if the monkey moved its mouth, they could see which was the motor cortex. And if the monkey moved its arm, they were able to work out all kinds of things from doing that. And one day, one of the scientists walked over and he picked up an apple. And when he picked up an apple, the motor section of the monkey's brain lit up. And that's how literal the social brain is. And it explains what I'm going to tell you. When I say or do something, or if I move my motor cortex, it will affect you. Your brain, if you don't know it, is firing. So you are the closest people to your children. And when you are angry or stressed or worried, and your brain is firing on heightened alert, whether you mean to or not, your baby or child's brain will also be on heightened alert. Just like when he picked up the apple, that part of the brain. So this is how intimately we're all interwoven. And people often feel it. With adults, we often feel it. When you're with someone who's stressed, you feel more stressed. We say it's contagious. But you need to know, and again, this is why I said at the beginning, I don't want you to leave here feeling guilty, but you need to know that if you don't learn to manage your stress, if you're highly stressed, even if you say and do all the right things, if your brain is firing, your child's brain is firing. And so it's very important to make it part of your daily routine to think about being a calm adult, not a perfect adult, but to work on being calmer. And we can all work on being calmer. One of the easiest ways is to do daily breathing. And now again, there's a lot of science behind it, but it's not new. You know, Tai Chi, Chinese medicine, for years, everyone's been talking about just breathing. Now we can put it into terms. We can say it calms your vagus nerve. But literally just start your day off. Just breathe deeply or find a method of breathing. You don't have to go onto a yoga mat for 20 minutes. Just breathe 4 times very, very slowly and tell yourself, I'm going to be calm today. I'm going to keep my heart rate down by breathing when I feel myself getting a bit stressed. Now, not only will your brain then help without you doing anything else, your child's brain, but if you do it aloud, or if your child sees you, you're teaching your child a life skill without lecturing your child. So you're not saying, now don't forget to breathe every day. Just by doing it, your child will also start doing it. So it's very important that you're aware of when your stress is getting out of control, or you're starting to lose it, when you're starting to get agitated, angry, irritated. And as parents, we are responsible to create an atmosphere. I want to share that I once heard Dennis Prager speak, and he's written lots of books, and one of them is on happiness. But one of the things he said that really stuck with me is someone was asking him, how do you chase happiness? How can I be happy every day? And he said, happiness is a behavior. And we each have a responsibility to behave in a happy way when we're around other people. And I thought that was a fantastic way of describing it. Don't wait for the feeling. Don't wait for the environment to be right. We all have responsibilities to each other, to lift each other up, to be civil around each other, to be in a good mood around each other. And we're not talking about being inauthentic and really when you're desperately unhappy, but we're talking in general, to learn how to have a smiling face, to learn how to create an environment where the people around us can be calm, and we will benefit as well. And by the way, if you do have problems going on in your life, then the calmer you are, the better your problem-solving skills. So this is why I was saying that helping your child be calm will help them in every way, even cognitively and even problem-solving. So if you can see me, I'm going to hold my hand up. If I open my fist and I do this, this part of the brain is symbolized. The thumb is the limbic system, and we can say this is the brain stem. And then my fingers on top we can talk about as the neocortex. This is the problem-solving part. If this part, the anxious part, is firing, very hard for the problem-solving part to work. We say this is hijacking the rest of the brain. So the more you are calm, even if there are things going on in your life, and they usually are, you will actually problem solve better. So it actually serves you well to work on being calmer. One of the ways that I teach people to be calm, and often it sounds so simple, is people don't realize that they're working themselves up with catastrophic language. The one very common one is, and I won't demonstrate it, but is by swearing. Even when something simple happens and someone swears, you're actually activating your limbic system. It's like this something, I'm swearing that you're telling yourself something terrible is happening. If you use catastrophic language, like this is a disaster, that person is abusive, he's a bully, we're going to have, my house looks like a hurricane hit it, all those words are catastrophic. These are simple things that you can change. Be very aware if you are using catastrophic language, catastrophic tone. So often we run around our homes, nothing special is going on. It's a normal day in a house with children. There's a mess on the floor. You've got deadlines. You've got a car to get to the car. You've got to get to school. You've got to do the homework. You've got to get dressed. There's always things. And so every day we're rushing. That is setting off a fight or flight reaction. Then when your language is catastrophic, hurry up, we're going to be late, we've got a deadline, if this continues, I'm going to have a nervous breakdown. All the kind of language we use, you are escalating yourself, your brain and your child's brain, but the language adds on to that. So our language and our tone can do a lot to helping us be calm. If every single day, which it is, you've got to get up, everyone's got to get up and everyone's got to get ready and everyone's got to get to the car and everyone's got to get to school. There's nothing new. There's nothing out of the ordinary. There's nothing catastrophic. You need to describe your day like that. You need to go, this is just an everyday. Let's work out how we're going to get to the car on time. It doesn't have to be rush, 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 quick, 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 in the car, out the car. That unwittingly is causing stress, anxiety, fight or flight. So be very aware of your language and your tone, because even if there's nothing major going on, your brain and your body could be firing at quite a high level because this is your normal way of speaking. So what you want to aim for in being a good parent or a better parent is what I call being a calm container. Because adults, our brains are able to emotionally regulate better than children's brains. So one example would be that adults can delay gratification more than children can delay gratification. So if somebody has to wait in the family, generally parents need to wait and the child goes first. So let's say it's food or having a turn, they literally can't wait and we can hold off a bit longer. We can emotionally regulate enough that we can wait our turn. Similarly, to be a calm container, we need to provide the environment that our children who are learning to emotionally regulate can do it in a safe way. Otherwise, this is what happens. Your child starts having a meltdown, very common. We don't know how to manage it, so they start yelling, so we start yelling. They go, oh, we go, what are you doing? They go louder, we go, I can't bear this anymore. They go louder, and we go, I'm going to have gray hair soon. We're just escalating. So they might start having a meltdown. We need to do some breathing, just sit quietly and think about what is the best way I can provide a calm environment while my child's brain is firing and they're having a meltdown. And sometimes it's just sitting quietly. Sometimes it's giving a hug. Sometimes it's just making a calm suggestion. I think your socks are next to the bed. So be aware, this is a common thing we do as our child is distressed. Because we've got a social brain, it sets ours off. But we have the ability to know that and go, I'm not going to be set off. And I'm not going to escalate the situation. I'm going to calm the situation. So there are many, many times with children where they set off a situation and we have a choice to calm it with our words or our tone or our behavior or to escalate it. So the child is nagging because they're anxious. When are we going to get there? When are we going to get there? We have a choice. We can just keep calmly say, do not worry, you're safe. We will get there in half an hour. We can, we're not superhuman, after 5 times go, you know what? I have told you 5 times. Is there some other way that can help you feel secure? Maybe make a recording. Maybe give them something to hold on to. Try and problem solve it. But what we often do is they go, I've had enough already. You keep asking me. And then the child gets louder and you go, I've told you, why are you so? And becomes more and more. So we keep having choices of how to calm the situation. So how do we do this? Everything I'm talking about is regular stress that we all have. But if it becomes chronic, if every single day you are shouting and losing it and not sleeping well and realizing that you're not a calm container and you can't do it on your own, you need to invest in yourself. You need to get the therapy that you need. Can be psychological, can be psychotherapy. Today we talk a lot about body work. I heard a beautiful thing from Bessel van Kolk. He wrote a fantastic book called The Body Keeps the Score. And I was listening to a podcast of his the other day, and I'm very interested in this, and people who know me will know why. He talks a lot about people who are traumatized. They're not very verbal, and things like drumming and singing is very soothing. So it's a non-verbal way that people who've had trauma can actually help their body work through the trauma. What he was also saying is that people were asking how many people are traumatized, and he was saying where there is less trauma is where people who have attachment can go back to a safe environment. So I once read a statistic, and I'm not an expert on it, but I thought apparently it's quite true, that the soldiers in Israel statistically have a slightly lower percentage than other wars. And one of the theories is because they come home to loving families. And the whole of Israel is a loving family. Whereas a lot of other army veterans come home and they despised and spat on and criticized and don't get the help that they need. So when someone has a real disaster or real problems and they're surrounded by people that can support them, they're less likely to have trauma. But what he said that I hadn't heard before, he was saying, and that is why when people go through difficult times, they get together in cathedrals, I'll say, and shuls. And what do? We sway and we sing and we together. And that is very healing. So there are lots of different things. If you don't want to get into verbal therapy that you can do that will help you, you need to find good people who will help you. But in your home as well, you can introduce this. Have music in your home. I'm very against, someone was asking me about if your child's upset, should they punch a pillow? I'm very against those methods because you're developing patterns of getting out aggression by shouting and screaming, which are aggressive acts. But if you had a pillow that your child could hug and soothe themselves, or you could have a drum where they could just drum rather than punch something, that is very, very soothing. And sitting around a table and singing, or even in the car, if you had a bit of a stressful morning, put on some music, sing together. Don't underestimate how that'll calm everything down. Now, another big part of safety and security is having a calm home. We have to remember that none of us live on our own. We live in a system. We live in families, we live in societies, and our society affects us. A lot of our stress comes from the way society is managing. You can't actually separate the two. It's why in organizations, the World Health Organization has come out and said, more and more people are burnt out. As you know, in America, they had the big resignation. 4 million people resigned. And the World Health Organization in 2019 said, stop blaming individuals for burnout. It's organizations. The organizations do not have cultures that are safe. They actually overwork people, don't define roles, treat people quite badly, and that's causing the burnout. The same thing. Just like just sending your child off to therapy is not enough. Your child is part of a system. You've got to look at what's going on in your system. And so one of the most important things is to have a home, I'll say that's relatively calm. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but chaos leads to a feeling of insecurity and not safety. So a chaotic home where dinner is served one day at 5 p.m. and one day at 9 p.m. and one day there isn't dinner. And when in the morning you can never find the socks. And when projects have to be in, no one knows when the project's meant to be in. When you're meant to fetch your child from school and you don't arrive for half an hour. All these things are fine every now and then. We all do them. But when it's chronic, that causes a lack of safety and insecurity in the child. So you need to make sure that your home has enough order, enough consistency, enough reliability that your children feel safe. I spend a lot of time, I never thought I would, working with people to teach them skills, time management skills, organizational skills. And sometimes people have executive process functioning issues. So I'll throw this out, and I'm glad I can't see actually anybody in the, I'm not looking at anybody, but often people will have their children diagnosed now who have ADHD. And one of the symptoms is executive planning issues, the difficulty of starting a project, planning it, and seeing it through to the end. But you know what? Very often the parents have it as well. And so if you suspect, if you're often losing your keys or things are chaotic or you find it difficult to get things together, again, seek out the help you need. It's good for you, but it'll have a ripple effect that it'll be good for everybody. And I want to keep stressing, we're not aiming for perfection. We're aiming for what Winnicott called a good enough environment. As long as it's consistent enough, as long as most of the time things are running in an orderly fashion. Now, another very important thing to do is what we call managing conflict. We no longer call it resolving conflict. It's not possible to always resolve conflict. When two people live together, there will always be conflict. We now have, when I originally trained in couple therapy, it was new then. And one of the forerunners, Virginia Satir, used to say, if you get a husband and a wife in a room together, if you get them just to talk enough and understand each other, there won't be conflict. 40 years on, we know that's not true. Even in the best of marriages, there will still be conflict because they're two people with different genes, different backgrounds, different personalities, different values, who are trying to learn to work together. It's how do you manage that conflict so that it doesn't become abusive, name calling. It doesn't become a crisis each time. It's something that is expected and it gets dealt with as a problem that needs to be solved. If there's a lot of conflict in a home, if there's a lot of screaming and shouting, we know now with the functional MRIs that we have that the brain shuts down. This part of the brain shuts down when there's a lot of screaming and shouting. And in fact, there's been some debate. I know the New South Wales government debated it about 4 years ago, where the screaming and shouting should be put in the category of emotional abuse. It wasn't passed, sorry, but it's something to think about, that when there's a lot of shouting, it can feel, even if you're not shouting at the child, that atmosphere, the social brain is picking up the tension, the anger, the aggression, the hatred, the revenge, all those feelings. The brain starts shutting down, and it could be part of emotional abuse. So you want to manage conflict, expect it, but find ways to communicate. And all these things I'm mentioning, there are lots and lots of easy solutions. None of these are in-depth stuff. It's just skills that one can learn to implement into one's life. And even if you just implement one thing, it can change everything. So for example, one technique that's very good for managing conflict is having a business meeting with your spouse, and as your children get older, with them as well. So instead of spending every day bickering, you know, your mug is in the sink, you didn't make the bed, you're late again, we just the whole day bickering with our spouse, you write it down, and once a week you sit down and you have a business meeting and you go through it. Now, everything about this has value. Waiting until the meeting, often you go, I really want to talk about the cup. And maybe you, when you're not in that angry mode, you actually realize it's not important. Another thing is, by sitting down with a pen and paper, you're actually saying this is important, what you think is important, our marriage is important, our home is important, and we're giving it the time that it needs. So you're actually giving it gravitas. And then you literally do sit down, and in a calm way you go, it bothers me when you didn't make the bed, and you both will attempt to work to solve the problems because you're in that meeting to solve the problem. So that's a simple method of managing conflict. Not so easy to implement. Why? Because I find that couples find it hard to make the time. But it's worth it because of all the benefits. Now, one of the ways that children show their distress, when children are distressed, let me put it this way, is you will know. If they're not distressed, they could still be on heightened alert from the reasons that I've given you. But once they're distressed, you really need to address it. And you'll see it in their symptoms. They either won't be sleeping, their eating habits will change. Sometimes they used to be toilet trained and they start having accidents. But they'll often be sick as well. Often that's the way that they're communicating. The same thing with you. You might not think that you're suffering from stress, but if you're getting frequent headaches, if you have irritable bowel, if you keep getting colds and flu, very often it's because you're not dealing with your stress. If you deal with your stress and it becomes part of the culture of your home, that when there's a problem, we address it, your children will benefit again because there's a psychological safety that everybody is open to the idea that we can have stress, we can have anxiety, we are not calm, and we need to do something about it. So these are a lot of practical tips that I've wanted to share with you. None of them on their own are rocket science. The trick or the method is to implement it into your life. Simple things every single day, and having the goal of having a calm, happy, warm home. I'm really encouraging you to take back the power of being the parent, to know that you will be your child's biggest influence. And no matter how good the medical or psychological professionals you're going, you cannot be replaced. So feel empowered. Walk away tonight going, there's a lot I can do. I'm going to make eye contact more. We're going to sit at dinner and not put devices on. We're going to make sure that we're present and have some quality time every day. It doesn't mean building Lego. It could mean quality time is just sitting, checking in, talking, and being fully focused. Be affectionate. Smile at your child. Your child will feel safe and secure if your child knows you like them as a human being, if you laugh at their jokes. So be aware. Often you're not aware. You're in a bad mood, and your child is going around thinking, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong? Why is dad cross with me? Why is mom not smiling at me? So just be aware of how you're coming across. And most of the time, if your child's around, connect. Let them know it's okay to say I'm in a bad mood. If I'm not smiling, it's not about you. And aim for having a warm, nurturing home. That in itself will do a lot to help your child feel safe and secure, and then your child will be calm. So overall, everyone's going to benefit. All of these are basic common sense. But as I say, it's about implementing it. It's about being proactive in putting this in place in your everyday life. Start with one thing, whether it's the breathing, whether it's a meeting once a week, whether it's making sure you make eye contact with your child once a day. Just start with one thing. And when you're doing that quite often, then think of a second thing and slowly build these strategies into your home. And you will see, not only will you feel better, but of course your children will do better. And then everything else, it's a domino effect. They attach better to you. Very often their behavior improves. The home is happier. Their problem solving improves. Your problem, all these things pay off. And the bit of work that you put in, there will be huge dividends. So I hope you'll all be encouraged to bring in some small change. Whatever we're doing, as I said before, we can all do a little bit better. Sometimes we have to be reminded to be more present because we live in such frenetic times, such pressure times. But it's really about getting back to basics. And maybe I'll actually just end with that. I was on a podcast recently. It was called something like Super Moms. And this podcast was all about how do moms juggle, you know, and this is the language people use. This is, by the way, it's not catastrophic language, but it builds up anxiety. You know, how do moms juggle? You know, you've got 15 things to do all day. You've got the home and you've got the children and you've got to work and you've got the mortgage. And even as I'm talking, that's what happens. And the minute you start talking in this language, you're escalating. And by the way, I'm not trying to be sexist. It's dads as well. But this was a super mom podcast. How do moms juggle everything? So at the end, they asked me, the genre of podcast is, you know, they ask you to share something about yourself. And they said to me, what do you think? You know, when do you feel like a super mom? And I thought about it. And look, for me, I have to be honest, I don't have, I'm quite an organized person. So that's not where my struggle lies. I have, believe me, my own number of struggles, but that's not one of them. But I thought about it and I thought, you know, when I feel like a super mom, when I'm sitting around the table with my family and we're just bonding, you know, we're just talking and we're just laughing and we're sharing. That's when I feel we're a family, we're together. My kids want to be with me. I want to be with them. It's not about, and I'm not dissing the podcast, but it's not about how many cakes you baked or how much you got through the day. For me, that's just a structural thing to provide a calm home. Being a super mom or dad or being a really involved parent is being present. That's one of the most important things that you can aim for. So I hope you've come away with something that you can start with and see the value of working on yourself and on your children so that everyone can benefit. So I'm very happy. I'll just look, there is one chat, but to take questions, maybe Leslie can manage the podcast name. I think it's called Super Moms. If you go onto Spotify and Google my name, there are a few I've done, and I can't remember that exact one. I've done quite a few on parenting. So my name comes up on Spotify. Okay, so Leslie, do you want to, maybe people can put up their hand. Leslie, if you can see everyone on their screens. and see if anyone has a question, or someone can unmute themselves and ask.
Hi, Renee.
Hello.
It's Barbie Golan speaking.
Hello.
I'm just thinking back to when you were saying the language to use when you're in a hurry or you're trying to, there is an actual consequence to if we don't hurry up, we're going to be late. And if you don't hold that with two hands, it's going to spill. Like these are reality, not necessarily negative, but it's like factual. How do you motivate and like not with force, but it's they need to get going. How do you just stay positive and use what language would replace in those scenarios?
Okay, so thank you for asking that question, and I love that question because it speaks to one of the way that I think and work, and that is that parenting is a holistic thing, and so you can't address just the problem out of context. So if someone comes to me, I would look at, for example, what happens is, and you're not saying this, but if you don't mind if I'm just going to be a bit general for a while, we get into coercive parenting because we haven't put the structures in place. And so either we're still impatient or we haven't planned well enough or our home isn't running. So one has to think and go, okay, how can I teach my children to be ready at the car 20 to 8 so that we can go? That is the thinking behind it. And that involves often structural changes. Often it means the parent has to get up 20 minutes earlier. Because one of the mistakes we make is we're in the shower and we're yelling, get ready, we got to leave in 20 minutes. They won't be getting ready. And if we get up that bit earlier and we're actually ready and going, there are a whole lot of things, it becomes planned. You teach them to be ready by a particular time. You teach them to have their own alarm clock and what we call self-determination, manage themselves. So in general, when those structures are in place, you get out of coercive parenting and you've taught these behaviors. You know, now we talk about habits. There's nothing new, but, you know, these phases that go atomic habits. It's that simple. You choose one habit that your child learns to wake themselves up with the alarm. And then you choose the next habit that from there they go and brush their teeth. And within a few weeks, your child is getting ready themselves and will be at the car by 20 to 8. It takes a bit of planning. It's the longer, shorter way. When we don't put that planning in place, then often we're having to try, as you say, how do we get them going? So your language is very different because it's a psychoeducation kind of language. On other times is we are rushing for no real reason. And so we have to calm ourselves. And this is where I'll talk about myself, that I can be quite impatient. And often I would be, so the example you give is, you know, you're getting your kids in the car and you're going, hurry up, we've got to get to Coles. And then you get to Coles and you've rushed everybody. And then as you walk in, I'm talking about myself, right? I see a friend and I go, hi, how are you? And for 20 minutes, I'm chatting while my kids are watching me. So I've been rushing them to get to Coles, but then I've got 20 minutes to chat. And we all do this. So what you need to do is you need to go, am I really in a rush? Because if you're not, getting to school, you need to get there at time. But if it really doesn't matter, 10 minutes or not, you will be more relaxed to go, guys, we've got this window in which we have to go. But the more you teach your children to be self-determined, you'll see that they'll be more cooperative. The two are very, very linked. In the rare occasions where the systems are in place, but something has to be done, your language is fine. That is life. It's a natural consequence. Guys, if you run late, you will be late for assembly, or we'll be late for the movie, or we'll miss the plane. So there's no option now. We actually have to go. And there is a little bit of a deadline in that, so that's appropriate. Those are the kind of things that one needs to think about. So you want to see that you want to move away from what I call crisis management parenting, in the moment trying to solve the problem. Well, this is how I work with parents and how my parenting course is structured, that you sit back and you think about all the things that you could improve that take away a lot of those issues that come up. That's it, Barbie. Are you there?
Thank you.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So this is probably a question that a lot of people deal with is Obviously we've come out of the age where you smack, or even I think timeout, I think is out of date as well. We've got a 4-year-old, and sometimes you just don't know how to stop a certain behavior without some sort of a blind threat. Well, if you don't do this, then no toys, or something along those lines. And you feel very restricted because there's not that many tools that you can activate to get your child to do the right thing. So are there more tools that we, instead of a blind threat?
Yeah. Because that's the coercive parenting that I'm talking about. So let's use an example.
But
let's
sometimes
say you want your child to sit down at the dinner table.
Yeah.
Now, what you're saying is what we'll do, right? As parents, we'll go, stop running around, or I'm going to smack you, or you're going to go to your room. You haven't taught your child anything. Whereas if you go, you want to say to the child, come and sit down, tell the child what you want to do, you're more likely that they will listen, and you've educated them what you want. But if they still don't keep running around, then there's what's called collaborative problem solving, where you need to sit down and go, what behavior do we want to work on? And you actually work out a plan. We want our child to learn to sit at the meal time. What is a reasonable amount to sit down? What do we need to do to educate our child? Because children don't behave because they don't have the skills. It's not that they're behaving badly. We have to work out why it is that they're not doing what it is. Sometimes it's simply because we've never told them. We've told them what not to do, but we haven't educated them what to do. So they're very rare. Once you start thinking in terms of what, and this is another thing, is one needs to once a week sit down and go, what behavior are we going to focus on? And to actually have a plan. There are lots of things you can do. One is to educate the child. Another one is to reinforce whenever the child does what you're looking for, rather than reinforcing and punishing what they're not doing. So when the child tells the truth, as I was mentioning earlier, you give them a hug and you reward them, as opposed to what we often do is punish them when they tell a lie, which actually is what we call negative reinforcement. So there's a lot of stuff. Don't have the forum now. There are many, many tools, but it's a very different way of parenting to what you're describing, which is the old-fashioned way, which is you're doing something wrong, there's a consequence.
But it sounds like a lot of the stuff that you've said, it's a lot of prevention. It's a lot of preparation. It's a lot of sort of teaching them everything they need to know, and then those bad negative behaviors won't even come into play, right?
Very often.
Yeah. So, but in the time, okay, you didn't prepare properly, or for whatever reason the child is, misbehaving. What other tools that are not so negative can you employ right there and then?
So look,
what would you recommend?
Okay, so I'm not against timeout, but it's the way you do timeout. So if you want to use timeout is when you tell the child that you need to leave the room. You don't tell it in the distress. So in a general way, let's say you one day getting a bit frustrated. This is the best way to teach it. You might say to the child, I'm sitting here and I'm getting frustrated. I'm just going to go and sit in my room and breathe until I'm calm, and then I'm going to come back and talk to you. So then you tell the child, sometimes when I feel that you're getting very agitated or you're losing it, I want you to do the same. I'm going to ask you to go to your room. It's not a punishment, just long enough so you can calm down, and then you can come back and then we can problem solve. It's a different feel. It's not a punishment, because
to give yourself time out.
You can give yourself time out. And as kids get older, that's often all you can do, because you send them to the room and they don't go. But the idea of this attachment and safety and security, why time out is no longer, as you say, in fashion, is because it's done in a punitive way. It's go to your room and I'll tell you when to come out. So the child feels in trouble and then they feel alienated in the room. Whereas when you go, this is to help you, just go and breathe, and sometimes you go with the child and help them calm down, and then they come back. It's the flavor of it is very different.
Yeah, thank you.
Renee, hi.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Nadine Kerr. I I wanted to ask, sometimes our little ones really struggle when we say that they can't have something or they can't do something. And I always try and frame it in the way of, well, it's not possible right now, but maybe we could look to it in the future. Or I don't say, no, you can't do this right now, or I will try not to. But very, very often, or specifically our little one really struggles with being told no. And maybe it's because we're kind of, in general, quite lenient parents. But do you have any strategies for like assisting? Because he'll sometimes go quite crazy. We generally just, work through it and let him have his moment, and then eventually it passes, but it can be quite intense. Are there any like strategies around that?
So with all these, I'm just going to give you a preamble, which you're not asking because I can hear you're okay with doing it. But I want to say this, one of the reasons parents sometimes find it difficult to say no is because they want their child to like them. And another reason is that they're worried that, they're going to harm their child in some way. So teaching your child to delay gratification, if you know that it's a very important skill in life, to do anything in life, we need to be able to delay gratification. So once you start feeling that it's a good thing I'm doing, teaching my child to wait, you will feel better about it, and your child will pick up on a brain level that this is good for me. So when the calmer you are and go, really, this is a life skill I'm teaching you, it's good for you to wait. So then what the kind of thing you can say, I have no problem with you saying in the future, but sometimes kids remember, and they might remember you promised we're going to go to Disneyland, and then you're in a bit of trouble, and they sometimes feel betrayed that you promised something. So if it's something that you might give them in the future, okay, but just be careful about that because they remember. So the thing would be to say, I know it's very hard not to always get what you want. It is, and you validate the feeling. And then you might go, and what can you, so we talk about self-soothing. So we do this with adults, right? Part of therapy when an adult can't get what they want is we teach adults to self-soothe. So you can't have the relationship you want. It's not working out, or you can't. Therapy is about helping you manage your feelings, not fixing that. So sometimes you can actually say, let me give you a hug. I know it's hard to wait, or what will help you feel better because you can't have it. Instead of, it's teaching them to self-soothe, because that's what we do that helps us delay gratification.
Thank you.
There's a question in the chat I'm going to answer. I opened it, now it's not opening. Okay. How best to create emotional safety for the kids in an environment where there's a separation happening and only one parent living at home? So the same applies, that the more we get the support we need, and that we managing our emotions the best we can, and it doesn't mean pretending we're not devastated or upset or miserable, but it's we learning to regulate our emotions. And what that means is we're not coming home and screaming at the kids, and we're not turning to alcohol and drugs. We're not doing anything. We're learning to manage our sorrow, our stress, or whatever we're going through. That's one way that they'll feel safe. So even though something not nice is going on in our family, we're safe. This parent isn't going to lose it. But also, if the parent shares but doesn't burden the child. So if the parent is able to say, I'm feeling very sad, but the burdening is when the parent says, oh, I'm feeling so sad, come and cheer me up, or tickle my back, or make me feel better. That's not okay. But it's okay, like, let's say that you're sitting at dinner and the other parent isn't there. Go, it's so sad when a family isn't together. I'm feeling really sad right now. And that gives the child the possibility to also say it. So you create an environment where they can talk about their feelings, and they then know that you're not going to fall apart if they share their feelings. Because sometimes where parents go wrong is, as I say, they burden the child, but sometimes parents want to cheer the children up all the time, and the children feel they can't bring their sad feelings because it's going to tip the parent over. It's too much. So the more you can manage, the child can sometimes come and load on you, and they'll feel emotionally safe. So you can't get rid of the feelings and you can't get rid of what you're going through, but you can hold them and you can sit in that space in a way that feels safe. One can be in grief about something, but there's still a safety in that. Depends how we manage that. So I hope that answers your question. Are you able to share strategies or tools with how to build self-determination with ADHD at play and their focus isn't there? Okay, Josh, good. So self-determination is, it doesn't really matter if a child has ADHD or not. It might just mean that you have to simplify the instructions and only give one at a time, and make it very modular, that you in the things I'm going to tell you now, you teach it in a very simple way. So one of the key symptoms of ADHD is they can't filter information. So if you give 5 instructions, they're not going to remember them. So you just do one at a time, maybe 2, but it's the same idea. So self-determination is you move from being a policeman in the house, get up, get dressed, brush your teeth. I have parents of children well, they're not children, in HSC that are waking the kids up. The younger you start, the better. So from age 2 or 3, you get a lovely alarm clock. And when you put them to bed at night, you encourage them to put on the alarm. And you tell them when the alarm goes off in the morning, I want you to jump out of bed. The younger they are, as I said, the more cooperative kids, they normally love to do this. They jump out of bed and then you reward them with a hug or a kiss or a remark. After they've done this 4 or 5 times, it's become a bit of a habit. You don't need to keep rewarding them. The joy of being independent in itself is a reward. Now they've woken themselves up, then you might, if they're very young, you might then go, okay, now once you've woken up, whatever your routine is going to be, you know, you now go and brush your teeth. So they learn, wake up myself, brush my teeth myself. And so you build up the day's routine of them doing things themselves. When they've got things to do at school, you can support them in what they do, but you encourage them to do it. Never do their projects for them. Encourage them. So self-determination actually has 3 parts. The one is autonomy. You encourage them to do things in their way. The one is mastery. You give them things to do for themselves, dress themselves, feed themselves, do their own homework, whatever it is. And the third part of self-determination is relatedness to others, connection, back to the attachment. So you might encourage them to dress themselves, but you could allow them to wear what they want, as long as if it's winter, they're wearing winter clothes. So you might go, it's Sunday, I don't mind what you wear, but it is cold, so choose something warm, and they can wear purple with pink, and you don't really mind. Or this slipper and that. Rather, they, again, back to this idea of feeling seen and feeling heard. The more you allow them to do it their way, they will have a feeling of self-determination. So it takes a lot of pressure off you as well, by the way. It's quite freeing. And it's a much calmer home when you're not fighting over what they're going to wear or getting them to brush their teeth and those kind of things. But as Josh was saying earlier, and, you know, reinforcing or picking up what I'm saying is, you wouldn't open a business by just opening up a store on the corner. You wouldn't just, whatever your profession is, just start. You have a business plan. You talk to mentors. You work out how to do it. You do it step by step. You have a plan. You keep evaluating. You keep making sure it's working. Parenting is no less important, but we don't plan. And when people say to me, I wish there was a manual, there is a manual. I've got a manual. There are ways of doing it, but it's about giving it the time that it needs to think about, how does our home need to improve? Why is it so chaotic? How can I improve? I keep losing it at my children. How can all these things that I've spoken about, what behavior are we going to improve in our child this week? And the more structured it is, you feel more empowered as a parent, but your child will be calmer because your child knows that you are actually caring about their needs in an ongoing way. Okay, let's see, are there any more chats that have come up? Okay, pleasure, Daniel. Any more questions? Looks like none. Probably is time. Okay, I'm happy to wind it up. There will be a recording. And I am happy, as I say, any more questions? Otherwise, I think we can wind it up there. Leslie, I don't know how you feel.
Renee, thanks so much. Sorry, it's Alana. I've got camera issues. It won't let me turn it on
Okay,
for
I do
some
want to
reason.
answer one more question, Shaul Ezekiel. Sorry, and this will be the last. Our biggest problem is the internet. We cannot get our daughter off the internet. I cannot stress enough why it's important that you get your kids off screens and the internet. They have now shown, now one of my podcasts, I wish I could think which one it's called. I'll give it to you, Leslie, to give it to everyone. The person who spoke before me, she's actually a lawyer who is dealing with in America, it's an American podcast, dealing with Facebook and other social media in legal cases because they have proven that social media is as addictive as opioids. And I heard Gabor Mate speaking last week that children who watch too much, they are becoming addictive and are having the same effect that opioids have on us. It's not just a thing, a nothing. Screens are addictive and they are harming our brain. Just like opium harms your brain, they harm your brain. And so, again, when you understand the importance of it, if you knew that your child was taking a drug, you would do everything you could to make sure they're not. One of the things Gabor Mate was talking about, which I thought was fabulous, he was saying, and he was quoting other work, that our society lives in a trance. We just follow. We don't think enough. And I thought that's a beautiful way of looking. Everyone's just on screens. You know, you go to restaurants now, all the kids are, everyone just does it and it's easy. So I'm not criticizing anybody, but he spoke of, people are starting to write, why are we in a trance? Why am I not realizing what we're doing? And so you need to know it's serious. You know, the research is out. Your kids should not be on the screens too much. You're not going to feed them poison. You've got to give them limited amount, just like you give them healthy food. It's not even a choice. It's not even my opinion. So just like you would stop them, I know I'm repeating myself for the third time. I haven't, thank God, got dementia, but I feel so strongly about this. When you really believe something, you would stop your child. You would say, don't take that, it's dangerous. That's how you've got to think about screen time and the internet. Not just the fact what they might watch. It's not that. It's the addictive nature of it that has the same chemical effect as addictions have. And it's really getting serious. So do your children's brains good, just limit it, believe in it and find a way. If I can't answer everyone specifically, but we're back to if you struggle, maybe you have to work on learning how to be more assertive and to manage your feelings about being liked or being assertive. This is our responsibility as a parent to work on ourselves so we can implement what we need to. If it's that your spouse is arguing with you, then it's about conflict management. If it's about time that you're putting your kids because you haven't got time, then it's, I don't know what the skill is that you need to learn, but do it. Do it for your child's sake. I'll stop on that impassioned note. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Renee, thank
Thank
you so
you very
much.
much.
Thank you.
Pleasure,
Thank you.
pleasure. Hi, Danny. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
I know
Thank
people are signing off. I just wanted to say a quick thank you to Renee. She's really given us food for thoughts. And what really resonates is the fact that these devices that we are all using, I think we also need to role model as parents how much we actually on them and just be more present with our children. So thank you so much for all that you've given us. Lots of food for thought. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for also joining us.
Thanks, Renee.
Thanks, Renee, so much.
Thank you.
Leslie. Mom.